The beauty, grace, elegance, and courteousness of our Queen were incomparable, for all the natural graces and gifts which were hers in a most perfect degree were reinforced by the splendor of supernatural or divine grace, and effected a marvelous union of grace and beauty in all her being and activity, enthralling all in love and admiration of her. Divine Providence moderated the outward demonstrations of this affection, which those who conversed with her would have shown, if they had been left to the natural force of their spontaneous love of the Queen. In eating and in sleep, as in all other virtues, she was most perfect. She observed the measure dictated by temperance. Never did she exceed, nor could she. Rather, she deducted from the necessary. Although her curtailed sleep did not interrupt her high contemplation, as I have said before, number 352, yet she would have gladly omitted it altogether. In virtue of obedience, however, she retired to rest at the time appointed, and on her humble and poor couch, strewn with the flowers of virtue, and are surrounded by the seraphim and the angelic host who guarded and assisted her, she enjoyed more exalted contemplation outside of beatific vision, and more ardent ecstasies of love than all of them together. She divided her time and applied it with rare prudence, so as to give to each of her actions and occupations its proper share. She read much in the sacred writings of the ancients, and, by means of her infused science, she was so well versed in them and in all their profound mysteries that none of them was unfamiliar to her, for the Most High made known to her all their mysteries and sacraments. She treated and conversed about them in her conferences with the holy angels of her guard, familiarizing herself with them and asking about them with incomparable intelligence and great acuteness. If this sovereign mistress had written what she understood, we would have many other additions to the sacred scriptures, and we would be able to draw out of them a perfect understanding of those writings and the deep meanings and mysteries of all those preserved in the Church. All the plenitude of this science she utilized for the worship, praise, and love of God. To this she applied all knowledge without allowing one ray of her divine enlightenment to remain sterile or idle. She was most subtile in discourse, most profound in her intelligence, most exalted and loving in her thoughts, most prudent in her choice and arrangement, most efficacious and sweet in her operations. And in all things she was a most perfect example and an object of admiration for men and angels, and even, in a way, for the Lord himself, who had formed her altogether according to his heart and pleasure. Instruction of the Sovereign Mistress. My daughter, human nature is imperfect and remiss in practicing virtue, and easily weakens in its exercise, for it continually seeks rest and evades labor with all its might. When the soul listens to and extemporizes with the animal and carnal part of its nature, this latter will engross and overcome the forces of reason and of the spirit, and will reduce them to a dangerous and shameful slavery. This disorder is abominable and much to be feared by all, but God abhors it without comparison more in his ministers and in his religious. They, as a matter of course, are supposed to be perfect, and therefore are injured so much the more seriously if they do not come out victorious in the conflict of the passions. By remissness in battle, and by their frequent defeats, they live themselves into a paralyzing and self-satisfied conviction of false security, content with the performance of certain easy outward practices of virtue, at the same time imagining, without the least real advancement, that they are moving mountains. The demon then introduces other distractions and temptations, and on account of their small appreciation of the rules and practices of religion, they begin to weaken in all of them, esteem them as light and unimportant matter, and living on in their false security, come to lose the very perception of true virtue. I desire that thou, my daughter, guard against this error. Remember that a voluntary remissness in regard to one imperfection prepares and opens the way for others. These facilitate the commission of venial sins, these again of mortal sins. Thus the descent is from one abyss to another, until the bottom is found in the disregard of all evil. In order to prevent such a misfortune, it is necessary to intercept from afar the current of sin, for the practice or ceremony, which seems but small, is an outwork which keeps the enemy at a distance, while the precepts and laws concerning more important matters are the fortress walls of conscience. If the demon can break through and gain the outer defenses, he is in better position to gain the inner ones. If then an opening is made in the bulwarks by the commission of sin, although it may not be a very grievous one, he already has a better opportunity to make an assault on the interior reign of a soul. As the soul finds herself weakened by vicious acts and habits, and without strength of grace, she does not resist the attack with fortitude, and the devil, acquiring more and more power over her, begins to subject and oppress her without opposition.